Hello, I am Sandra Maria Delgado Gallo Molina Betancourt, and this is my family tree story. So that name, it is really common in Latin America to not only take your father's name, but also your mother's maiden name, her mother's maiden name, and then your father's mother's maiden name. And I totally remember as a little kid being super proud when I was finally able to learn all those names, and it became a way to really amaze my non-Spanish speaking friends when I could say like my full name as quickly as possible. And now as an adult, really having a chance to reflect on the fact that I don't really know that much about my family history and the history behind the names and the people that have carried them throughout all these centuries. I do know some things. I don't know much about my father's family. My father's father wasn't really in the picture. So unfortunately, I don't know anything about the Delgados, and that really makes me sad. My mother's family, well, I guess my father's mother, Carmen Molina, she was born in Medellin, Colombia. And she lived with her two sisters, and they raised these three children together, my dad and his two cousins. And so even though my dad was an only child, he really grew up in a sort of like sibling family. And my grandmother ended up moving to the United States when she was almost 90. As you may know, things in Colombia got really rough in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And one day, a bomb went off by my grandmother's house, and she ended up with a severed head in her atrium. And it was after years of my dad asking her to move to the United States. That was kind of like the final straw, so to speak. And she moved here. And so I was able to spend her last 10 years of her life with her, which was really special, and got to know her in a way I wouldn't have been able to otherwise. My mother's family I know a lot more about. My brother's kind of our family historian, and he's done a lot of digging, and he's been able to find my mother's my mother's side of the family, her mother's side of the family, the Betancourts, all the way back to Europe in the 1600s. So they made their way from Andalusia and Basque Country in Spain to the Canary Islands, and finally to Colombia in the 1600s. And the Catholic Church has kept a lot of good records, and my brother was able to find records of a Betancourt from the 1600s, who really simply put was a colonizer to South America and to Colombia specifically. And his death records list him as a captain. He had the title of captain, and he was a treasurer of mines. It didn't say what kind of mines, may have just been coal mines, but I'd like to imagine that they were emerald mines, because that's a lot cooler. And then we kind of like don't know a lot. And I do know a lot more about my family, my mom's side of the family, when they landed in El Carmen de Viboral, which is this just like really charming town, big town on top of one of the mountains of Colombia that surrounds Medellin. So Medellin is in a valley surrounded by mountains, and that's where my mom grew up, and where her family was for many, many generations, and continues to live there. And my great-great-grandfather, her grandfather, Bernardino Betancourt, what a name. I hear stories about him riding into town on a white horse, and they were the first family to have electricity and running water, and they were a very well-to-do, influential family in that town. And my great grandfather was the person that brought a ceramics industry to El Carmen, and artisanal ceramics, and people from all over Colombia and South America do come to El Carmen de Viboral to buy ceramics there. My mom's dad, so my grandfather, Luis Fernando, And my grandmother, Graciela, got married. So the Gallos and the Betancourts got married. And my grandfather opened up his own ceramics industry and lost everything with it. The details around that are a little murky. And so they ended up moving the whole family to the city, to Medellin, where things were different, you know? And it was there that my dad, or my mother, Maruja, and my father, Carlos Enrique, but everyone calls him Henry. Enrique and Henry, Henry is like a nickname for Enrique. They met in the 60s, early 60s, and they decided to move to Chicago because there was just a lot of opportunities here for work. And so they ended up getting married by proxy, which means that on their wedding day, my mother was in Medellin getting married in a Roman Catholic church with both sides of the family, the full shebang, Catholic wedding. She walks down the aisle and she says her vows to my dad's cousin, El Tío Pingüino, because my dad was already in Chicago and he was doing his vows at Mount Carmel Church on Belmont. So yes, marriage by proxy. My mom got on a plane. I don't remember if it was that same day or the very next day. And that was about 55 years ago. So they've been in Chicago for about 55 years. They worked in factories all their lives. In the 40s and 50s, all these factories opened up in Chicago, you know, West Side, South Side, Southeast Side, and a lot of Latinx people came to Chicago around that time for that work. My parents were among them, and it was good work, good pay. You got a pension, you got benefits, and my parents on a blue collar salary were able to buy, you know, a wonderful home in Chicago and then later in the suburbs. And so then my brother and I were born, Fernando Alonso and me, Sandra Maria. And I often think about the stuff that gets passed on from generation to generation, and not necessarily the physical stuff, but the more ethereal kind of details about someone. And as I said earlier, you know, something that bums me out is that there's a lot that I don't know about my family, but something interesting that I found out when it was my brother's 30th birthday, I bought him a gift certificate. He's into scents, and I bought him a gift certificate to this place called Le Labo in New York, and where they make a scent for you on the spot. And he had said to me, I had asked him what he got, and he said, well, it's a bunch of different things, but the main scent is bergamot. And I said, that's super interesting because my favorite tea is Earl Grey tea, and that's bergamot leaves or essence of bergamot. And then when I mentioned it to my mom, I said, oh, what an interesting coincidence. Nan and I both really love bergamot. And she said, well, that was my mother's favorite scent, and that was your grandfather's or great-grandfather's favorite scent. This is Bernardino. And he used to make scents in the back of the home that I knew of as a child. That was their home as a child. And it just got me thinking about that kind of stuff, like this connection, like this man that I didn't know at all, but we were like connected by something like that is, I don't know, just so unexpected and beautiful. So that brought me a lot of joy, and I ended up writing a play about it. And then the other thing I think about with my family tree, something that's just been passed on with generations, is just how music is in our DNA and this love of music. My mom tells me about, you know, growing up in El Carmen and how her father, my grandfather would play the violin, and my tia Inés would play the piano, and then the rest of the kids, there are 7 in the family, and my grandmother would all just sit in the living room and just sing and play music together. And that's something that my family, my mom and my dad, have both passed on to me, just like this love of music and expressing love through music. And now I express myself creatively through music. And it's just this really beautiful thread that, even though I never met my grandfather, my abuelo, Luis, and I was a baby when my abuela Graciela died. Like, I know that's something that ties us together, and that I hope that I continue to pass that on with my daughter, Stella. Grace, named for Graciela, my grandmother. When I told my mom that I was thinking about Graciela, she said, no, not Graciela, name her Grace, because my mom loves Princess Grace. So that's a little bit about me, a little bit about my family tree. Thank you for listening.